The second plague of Egypt. When the God of Israel ridiculated the gods of Egypt. Do you really believe you know the story of the plagues of Egypt? Do you really think it was just some divine punishment with inexplicable natural phenomena? What if I told you that each plague was a surgical and humiliating attack on the Egyptian gods themselves? That each disaster was like a direct punch to the soul of a civilization that thought itself invincible? Today, you will dive into second plague of Egypt, and you will understand why Pharaoh himself was forced to cry out for the God who refused to obey. A plague that, at first glance, seems ridiculous, but was actually one of the most humiliating and symbolic in biblical history. The scenario before the plague: Egypt against the God of the Hebrews. The first plague had already happened. The Nile turned to blood. All the water in Egypt was unfit for consumption. The Nile Empire, dependent on its sacred river, felt the first blow. But Pharaoh's heart remained hardened. He did not free the Hebrews. He didn't surrender. He openly defied God. And then the order came: "Go to Pharaoh and say to him, 'Thus says the Lord, let my people go, that they may serve me. And if you refuse to let him go, behold, I will smite all your borders with frogs.'" Exodus 8 verses 1-2. The second plague would not be long in coming. But why frogs? The plague of frogs. An attack on the religious heart of Egypt. If you think that God just chose a random animal, you are very mistaken. The choice of frogs was intentional, strategic, and brutal. In ancient Egypt, frogs were sacred symbols. The goddess Hek, represented with a frog's head, was one of the most revered deities. She was associated with fertility, birth, and renewal of life. Frogs were seen as signs of prosperity. They were respected and protected. Now imagine the horror. Millions of frogs emerging from the water, breaking into houses, taking the rooms, jumping over beds, climbing into people's bodies. Frogs in the oven, frogs in pots, frogs among the clothes, frogs everywhere. The Bible is clear. The frogs will come up upon you, and upon your people, and upon all your servants. Exodus 8 verse 4. The Egyptian people could not kill them, they were sacred. But now, these holy creatures became the source of the greatest heartbreak and disgust that Egypt had ever experienced. The humiliation was total. A supernatural invasion. This was not a natural plague. It was supernatural, uncontrollable, unbearable. The frogs weren't just in ridiculous numbers. They were tireless, persistent, almost as if they had been directly commanded by an invisible force. Egyptian houses, known for their open architecture, have become real traps. Imagine living days and nights without rest, hearing constant croaks, crushing frogs with your feet, smelling the putrid smell of dead bodies rotting. This wasn't just a plague. It was psychological warfare, the first sign of Pharaoh's surrender. In the face of chaos, Pharaoh bows for the first time. He calls Moses and Aaron and pleads, "Pray the Lord to take away the frogs from me and my people, and then I will let the people go." Exodus 8 verse 8. Moses asks, "When should I pray for the frogs to disappear?" Pharaoh's response is bizarre. "Tomorrow. Why not now? Why wait another day of suffering?" Maybe pride, perhaps disbelief, perhaps afraid of admitting their total dependence on God. Moses prays, and the next day, all the frogs die at the same time. But they have not disappeared. They died in courtyards, in rooms, in rivers, in temples. And the smell took over Egypt. The disgrace has not been removed, just silenced. The people had to deal with the corpses en masse, with the rot, with the memory of the trial. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the history of the plagues of Egypt, subscribe to the channel now. Here you will find serious, revealing and straight to the point biblical content. Like, comment and share so you don't miss the next revelations. The deep meaning of the second plague. The second plague was a direct affront to Hek, the goddess of frogs and fertility. God showed he could use the Egyptians' own symbol against them. This plague has a spiritual meaning fortissimo. What the world venerates, God can turn into shame. What seemed to be a source of life became a symbol of death and chaos. The gods of Egypt were nothing before the God of Israel. The plague of frogs revealed that the Lord was not just freeing a people. He was unmasking an entire system of false deities. What's more, it was the first time that Pharaoh recognized the power of the God of Moses. But even so, his heart hardened again. The lessons for us today. This ancient story resonates strongly today. How many times do we put our faith in sacred things that end up turning against us? How often are we dominated by what we idolize? Are there frogs in our lives that need to be confronted? The second plague of Egypt is a warning. Nothing is greater than God, nor culture, nor tradition, not religion. When he decides to act, no empire, no matter how large, can resist. Conclusion. The second plague was just the beginning. The plague of frogs was only the second chapter in a long battle between heaven and earth. And each following chapter would be more intense, more symbolic, and more destructive. But what is clear right now is, the God of Israel was not asking for permission. He was claiming his people, and he would not stop until the liberation was complete. If you've made it this far, thank you very much for following this in-depth study on the second plague of Egypt. Your presence here shows that you value serious, biblical, and transformative content. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share with someone who also needs to hear this message. In the next episodes, we will delve further into the plagues and the hidden meanings behind each of them. Until next time, and remember, the God who acted in Egypt still acts today.